Are you ready for the greatest SEC title race we've ever seen?
With every SEC team in the top 70 in KenPom and top 100 in the net, a combined non-conference record of 170 to 22, and the number one conference, according to both KenPom and Evan Miya, 16 teams are ready to make this one of the most memorable and exciting SEC conference schedules that we've ever seen.
We're diving in. We're getting you caught up on what you may have missed, some thoughts so far on the non-conference schedule, discussing who might be the best team in the SEC and the best team in the country, what players are making a statement toward their NBA draft stock, and what we're expecting from now into March. That's today on the Hoop Southbound Show. Hey guys, and welcome into the show. Kind of a different field today. We're not doing a rebound this week. We kind of expected the result out of the Ole Miss Memphis game that we saw. That was both our pick is that Memphis would be there. Ole Miss just shot poorly and just had a rough game offensively. There's your down and dirty rebound if you want it that way. But today, what we're doing really is more of a primer for the upcoming SEC schedule. We're kind of recapping exactly where we are, looking at things, giving our perspective and thoughts on what's happened so far in this non-conference schedule going into what is going to be a heck of an SEC schedule run. Maddie, let's go ahead and let's get started on this thing. It's been one of the big debates so far through the non-conference schedule. Who is the number one team in the country? Because right now the AP poll and KenPom and all the other computer systems, the net, probably shouldn't use the net as a ranking system, but like all these different computers really like Auburn as the number one team in the country so far. What are your thoughts? Who should be number one, and why are you justifying it that way?
So I think there's two ways to look at it. I think, like you mentioned, you look at the metrics, you look at the computer kind of outcome, and Auburn's probably most people's first pick. But when I get into it personally, I look at that personal aspect. You put the heart into it, and you got to go with Tennessee. They haven't done anything wrong to be knocked off of that number one spot.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. We haven't seen an undefeated team since the 1970s when the Indiana Hoosiers did it. They're the last one in the modern era of basketball to do that. You got to keep going back further to John Wooden before that, and then in the 1950s with San Francisco. There's only been 7 undefeated teams all time in college basketball. So while I agree with a lot of Auburn fans' perspective, it's like you're just record watching, you're just score watching, is what the AP's saying. There's still merit to the fact that Tennessee is undefeated. Like, and while they haven't played Auburn's schedule, the eye test or the way that the AP voters do things, which side note, the AP vote doesn't matter toward March. There's merit to why they're number one right now, and it's kind of like what you're saying. They haven't done anything really to mess it up, but I do think there's also fairness in what Auburn's asking. If you took Tennessee and put them in Auburn's schedule, how do you think Tennessee does?
I think they may have a slip or two, just like Auburn does. So I think that's kind of where the head and the heart kind of go at it a little bit because, like I said, Tennessee's undefeated. They haven't done anything to lose that number one spot. But also, you got to look at the resume and the schedule. If Tennessee went in to Duke and had to play them, would they also come away with the win and still be undefeated? I think that's where the real question lies. And also, you put these teams on a neutral court, play 10 times, who's going to come out with the better record? I think it's kind of up in the air. So I feel like both of these teams have a case, especially when you look at the perspective of Auburn having the stronger strength of schedule.
They do have the stronger strength of schedule. That is a very good point. That Duke game is really kind of what is the deciding factor right now. Now, here's the thing. If you were to take the computer out, and this is more Tennessee's case, and we'll get into Auburn in a second because they have an argument that's very valid as well. If you took the computer away and you took the net and the quads away, because like the net's going to change here over the next couple of weeks and into the next month, if you took all that away and you looked at the schedule between Tennessee and Auburn, I think people would realize just how close they are. When you look at trends of national champions, which we do, and we use our spreadsheet and those things like that, Auburn and Tennessee are virtually tied on our spreadsheet. When you look at things like what the AP voters might consider, Both these teams have played extremely well in their conference schedule. They have beaten P5 competition. Both these teams have MTE championships on their hand. They both beat a top 25 team in their MTE run, with Auburn taking the win against it was Iowa State and then Tennessee beating Baylor and their MTE out in Baja Mar. And then you go a little bit further down the list, and you like both these teams have neutral site wins against P5 competition. To varying degree, Auburn's probably a little bit better win with their win over Houston in that neutral site game that they had. And then you go down to the one thing that's really truly different between these teams. Auburn has a loss on the road in a tough environment to a top 25 team. That's the Duke game. Tennessee went on the road to play Illinois, who's currently in the top 25, and won that game. That's the difference right now if you look at it at a non-computer perspective. It's very tough, and I think that's part of what AP voters are kind of considering when they say, eye test, Tennessee looks like the number one team in the country. But there's also eye test as well for Auburn, too, where it's like, Auburn's beating the crap out of everybody. Like, we saw what they did against Purdue. We saw what they did against Ohio State. We saw what they've done against a ton of teams. And we were saying it last week. It's like they got out of Maui and they got in a couple of fist fights in Maui, and now they're just beating the heck out of everybody. They're on a heck of a run right now and a heck of a high. I mean, the computers love them, everything else. Auburn's got a case, too, of being number one. Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely. So, like I said, I think you could put these teams on a neutral court and you may have one win better than the other at most, but I think it's going to be a fist fight. And I think that's why both of these teams have a case to be ranked number one.
The computers love them. They have more quad one wins than anybody else in the country. They're 6-1 right now in quad one games. They've played well. They've showed them out against some of the best conference opponents that they could face in the non-conference schedule here. Like we're talking Purdue, Houston, Iowa State, all these other great teams that they've faced, and they've done exceedingly well. Janai Broom right now, probably the best player. We've talked about him being player of the year candidate, best player on the best team kind of situation, something more to add to Auburn's favor. This team's very experienced. They're very deep. There's a lot to like about Auburn. And yeah, they have a legitimate case on the computer, the metrics, the predictive metrics and everything else. Those elements really like Auburn, and their resume is probably the best, and their schedule is ridiculous. The difference right now is the one loss, and that's going to be the conversation that I think right now we're standing on. Both these teams look really good. They both scored perfect scores in our spreadsheet. Like we like both of these teams, and right now our power rankings every week we're just like waiting for the other one to move a different team into the number one spot, or waiting for something to happen to show that one team should be number one or not.
Maybe until we find out, we just need to rank both of them number one, and then the next team can be the third.
Just 1-1-3 is
Yep.
how we need to do this thing. All right. Well, there were some that's a big storyline that was coming into this portion of the season. But, there was one storyline that really got started at the beginning of the year. We're now sitting here and the storyline is continuing, and that is of course the Kentucky John Calipari, Arkansas Mark Pope storyline that exists right now in the world. New coaching situations. How do we think these coaches are doing? And by the way, we got one more new coach that we need to talk about who's in a first year situation, and that's Mark Byington. He's in this as well. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about these first year coaches. Let's start with Mark Pope over at Kentucky. What are your thoughts on Mark Pope on how he's done to this point in the season?
So I think for Mark Pope, especially people that are like outside of basketball, weren't really sure what to expect when he came into Kentucky. Unlike us, who kind of studied a little bit of his system last season when he made that run with BYU, and just being a Kentucky legend, came in and really, I think he is meeting most people's expectations. We expected him to maybe lose a couple of games, especially with his system that is pretty much all offense. If you're not shooting the right shots, or you're not shooting well one night, that's going to burn you once or twice. And I think that's really the only downside of Mark Pope so far, is he's going to have to figure out how to put that system into SEC play. But for the most part, my expectations of Mark Pope, I feel like he has met, if not exceeded, my expectations in the Kentucky system.
So it's interesting where I'm sitting at, because it's amazing how much a week can change your perspective on something. The Ohio State game, right? They take this 20-point loss to Ohio State. it right now looks okay, but it looks more and more, and at least in my feeling, like that's going to be one of the worst losses of the non-conference for the entire conference. I don't expect Ohio State to stay where they are once Big Ten play gets going. They don't look good at all. Um, and so that 20-point loss, we kind of came into it last week going, good teams have bad games and, everything else. And it's like, I don't want to be just overreactive to it. And I'm still not trying to be overreactive to it. But I go back to last season, right? Mark Pope has this interesting quote that he has at BYU. They lose this game. I can't remember who the opponent was, but they took 35 threes in this game. And someone asked Mark Pope in his post-game conference, did you think you pushed it too much? Do you think you took too many threes? What's your feelings on that? And Mark Pope kind of said, in our system and the way that we play basketball, we're going to push it sometimes. We're going to go past the limit. We're going to cross the line, is what he said. And I feel like in that Ohio State game, when they're shooting 18% from three, and they should have been going for more twos and been more present in the front court, I think that's going to keep happening like every now and then. Like they're going to cross that line. They're going to beat some good teams. They're going to be really good. But like to me, like now my impression in thinking on it a little bit more on how that game played out is that Ohio after that Ohio State game, I'm a little bit more that he has met expectations. Like I think this is a little bit more where I kind of expected Kentucky to be. Not so much he's exceeded because after the Gonzaga game, we were like, oh man, that was impressive sitting back and kind of looking back, we're kind of like, that Clemson loss, bad 3-point shooting night. Maybe they pushed it a little bit too much. Ohio State definitely pushed it too much. Maybe just a little bit like, yeah, this is going to be a great offensive team. We expected them to be a top offensive team in the SEC, but they got to play better than that. So like for me, like they're getting to met expectations now at this point, and I'm not quite as just overwhelmed or blown away now. Like I'm not trying to take away from Mark Pope because I still think he's a good coach and one of the best offensive minds in college basketball nowadays. But I'm not in love with that. Where what we saw in that Ohio State game, and I think it's starting to show some reflection of what his time at BYU was. I'm curious to see how it'll go forward, but I'm kind of more of a met expectations at this point with Kentucky. And even though you got some great wins, there's some signs. There's some signs that we're starting to see something of a pattern now. And so like I'm kind of like when I grade Mark Pope, I'm kind of putting it at like a B plus here for his first, run of the season. And that might be controversial, but like starting to reflect on the two losses they taken this season, I'm wondering how that's going to reflect and if it's going to be closer to my original expectation of the Kentucky finishing seventh in the SEC.
Yeah, I agree right there with you, David. I'm at a B plus for Mark Pope. I think he's done a great job so far. Definitely higher than passing, but nothing phenomenal so far. I think if we're looking at figuring out a way to win in those games, I think that Gonzaga game, if he played more games like that where he was able to come back and get a decent win, we might be looking at this a little bit differently. But when you look at Clemson, when you look at Ohio State, there's definitely some flaws in the system that I think needs to be fixed before conference play, or we might be looking at a barely passing grade for Mark Pope by the time the season wraps up.
I don't think I don't think it's going to be barely passing at all. I think it's going to be great. I think he's going to do fine. I think he's going to. I mean, KenPom has right now their projected record at 2011 and 9-9. I'm pretty much there. I kind of agree with KenPom where it kind of lines out at this point. I think that would be right there. That 7 through 10 line there in the SEC. I think they're going to be really good. They might even surprise us and jump up 6-5. But like right now, I'm back to where I was. I'm back to where I was at the beginning of the season. I feel pretty much the same point after that Ohio State game. The defense is not in the top 40 in KenPom right now, where it was there for 5 minutes coming out of the Gonzaga game. Then when you do that against Ohio State, like I have some concerns at that point. But and that ranking had been dropping since Louisville, so it's much more reflective of where I thought we were coming into the season. So right now, Kentucky seems to be right at expectation. We were riding a high there after that Gonzaga game, I think. So, but yeah, that's where I'm at. Let's talk about the next guy because you can't have one without the other. Let's talk about John Calipari and Arkansas. Maddie, obviously we have some different views on this, and it's very different than our own fan base's views because we just kind of geek out on basketball a little bit different. But what have your thoughts been on John Calipari and how he's done through the first 11, 12 games of the season for Arkansas?
Yeah, I mean, if you take it as a fan base, the Arkansas fan base being delusional, you're gonna have some that are ecstatic and then some that are ticked that we aren't the NCAA champions yet through half of the season. But for me personally, I think when you look at what Coach Calipari came into, you've got one guy that's not even a scholarship player on the roster who's injured now. He was able to build this team and deal with some of these injury issues early in the season. We're finally starting to see that come through. And as this non-conference season has progressed, we've seen Jonas Adu come back. We've seen Nelly Davis start to get a little bit closer to where we thought he was going to be. And we've seen Boogie Flan come out of his shell. I think with all of those pieces, if we had that at the beginning of the season, we'd be talking completely different about Arkansas. But now that it's here, we're seeing what Calipari's been able to do with this team, with his chemistry, with his coaching style. I think he's meeting expectations. And I think if you had a couple of those games back that you didn't win, now that I'm gonna knock on some wood here, almost injury free, we'd be looking at a different record.
I do agree. I go back and I look at these losses. Like you lose that Baylor game, you lose that Illinois game. I think where Arkansas is at currently, I think you take one of those like now, based on the biggest factor being the return of Jonas Adu. Like that was a big issue. I've been saying since the preseason that I think the front court is the best part of Arkansas's overall team. They have a good backcourt, but I think the front court's the best piece. And it's because you have these, really good centers and five guys who have versatility in their game. You really needed Jonas Adu to get healthy and get in this team, get more involved and everything else. Right now, Z's got like an ankle injury, but hopefully he's coming back. Him having that versatility to stretch out. You got Trevin Brazil, who's starting to play like Trevin Brazil that we all expected him to be last season. I think part of it is when he's not asked to be the primary scorer, he's better. But when we look at like the projected best and most used lineups for Arkansas, you got Boogie Fland at 1, DJ Wagner at 2, Janelle Davis at 3, Duthero at number 4, and Jonas Adu at the number 5. That's close to what we expected. The number 2 one that's used at currently about 13% for Arkansas. The only difference in that one is Trevin Brazil. Like we expected some combination of that usage for this team as the primary lineups for it. And it's starting to reflect. It's starting to get some good minutes. It's starting to get better. It's now about Janelle Davis and Carter Knox stepping up for the Razorbacks. And I think if those two can step up, that's where the ceiling's going to push. Because right now, the defense is outstanding. It's the best defense Calipari has had ranking wise in about 5 years or even longer. As far as where this team has been, it's currently a top 30 defense in the country, according to KenPom. It's about getting the offense a little bit better at this point. And those are your two primary guys. Those are the guys. You got a 36% shooter coming out of high school in Carter Knox, and you got a guy who had an outstanding points per shot rate coming in and high usage rate coming out of Florida Atlantic. You got to get those guys the ball a little bit more. Got to get them a little bit more involved in the offense and get their numbers up just a little bit. You do those things, Arkansas ceiling starts rising. Definitely, if this Razorback team was healthy, I would expect a little bit more, but it's just right on target. This is right on target to me. I've been pleased enough. I am panicked about Monday. Panicked about Monday against Oakland because that is just the funniest non-conference game that Calipari could have possibly scheduled.
If Jack Oakey's not there anymore, don't sweat it as much. I think we'll be okay.
I'm panicking one way or the other. I'm superstition. I'm giving John Calipari a B plus. B plus for start of the season.
Yeah, I'm gonna go A minus B plus. If it weren't for some of the injuries, probably look a little bit better, more solidly stuck to the A minus. You know what? We'll go with A minus. We'll count
You're
me.
high on that. That's almost like passing expectations. Like I would say he's on point, like B plus.
I think with all that he's dealt with, I think is why it's given me a little bit more of an option. And also a reminder that I'm part of that delusional Arkansas fan base.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, fair enough. You're a little delusional on it. All right, it's Razorback fans for you. I'm one of them. Like, yeah, I'm all about the high of the ceiling. Let's talk about the other first year coach here in the SEC, and that is of course Mark Byington. Maddie, Vanderbilt is only lost one game this season, and it was in the championship game of the Charleston Classic. They have looked darn good. Mark Byington has this team 52nd right now in KenPom. They've got only the one loss. They have wins against power conference teams. They've been rolling through the season. They've got one more game here in the non-conference on Monday against New Orleans. I've been impressed. They've got a really good scorer in Jason Edwards. What are your thoughts on what Mark Byington has done his first year with Vanderbilt?
I think Mark Byington is like that headline for a paper that just gets absolutely buried by some astonishing news. Because when you look at it, if, Coach Cal, if Mark Pope, if, Tennessee and Auburn weren't fighting for the number one position, who wouldn't be talking about this Vanderbilt team that was expected to be in the bottom three of the
Picked last.
SEC,
Yeah.
be one of the better teams, and have one of the best records in the NCAA right now? I mean, you take a look at it, there's not very many one-loss teams left, and we're not even into conference play yet. But Mark Byington is doing some amazing things at Vanderbilt. I think, expectations were for him to come in and kind of have that rebuild year, restructure this team, kind of put his coaching out there. And we've been completely blown away. He's definitely exceeding expectations in my purview. He's got some good talent that, is moving the ball well. You've got some go-to guys. And with his coaching system, I think it fits well with the guys that he was able to recruit. So definitely exceeding expectations in my book.
He's did extremely well in the transfer portal, getting guys like Jason Edwards who can go out there and get you a bucket. He's taking 31, nearly 32% of the shots right now for Vanderbilt. He can go get the job done. AJ Hoggard, 22% of the shots for him. Really good facilitator of the basketball, playing a significant point at area of the point right now. Devin McLaughlin right now is playing really well. He's taking 20% of those shots. Tyler Nickel, Grant Huffman, Tyler Tanner, those guys are playing really good roles as well. Jalen Carey, who brought over from James Madison as well. He came out there and he put together a really good transfer class that works well. It goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the year. Don't just put Vanderbilt last because they're Vanderbilt. This team's a lot better. And let me tell you just how much better it is. The last couple of seasons, we have talked about, like at this point in the year, Jerry Stackhouse not having a resume that is ready to be looked at as something to get in to the NCAA tournament. The last 2 years, we've been saying that. This currently in year one, coming right now, pending a game against New Orleans, Vanderbilt is in a better spot than they have been the last 2 seasons under Jerry Stackhouse. And Jerry Stackhouse was voted to be the SEC Coach of the Year at one point 2 years ago while not making the tournament. Mark Byington has already put himself better than the last 2 previous seasons under Jerry Stackhouse so far to this point in his first year. It's been outstanding. The projected record right now on KenPom, 18-13, 6-12. That is so close to being an NCAA tournament team. I think there might be a chance that a 7-11 team comes out of the SEC with a chance to make the NCAA tournament. Vanderbilt's an upset away from that. Vanderbilt is an upset away. When you look at the projected right now on KenPom, they have a home game against Mississippi State where they are projected within 50% of Mississippi State. That one's projected to lose by 2 points right now. Could you upset Mississippi State? That would be a quad one win right now, I believe. And then you also got another one that's pretty close to that area against Missouri on the road. You've got another good one against another good chance at Oklahoma on the road, which is projected within 6 points. You got Texas at your house. That's only a 1 point game right now. You're projected to win that one. Could you possibly steal one against, say, I don't know, one that's really close? Like you've got Georgia on the road. You've got Arkansas at home. Like there's a couple in there that you could grab an extra game out of and go 19-12, which that 19 seems to be the magic number, and 7-11 in SEC play. Real chance. Kentucky's also projected really close. Kentucky's only expected to go in and win by 1 point right now, according to KenPom and Memorial. And we've seen what happens when Kentucky doesn't shoot well. Memorial's a really tough place to shoot sometimes, and it's the weirdest place building in the SEC. Maybe one game, 2 games. Can Vanderbilt get 2 upsets? Can they do that? Beat their KenPom record just by a little bit. Vanderbilt really could be a tournament team here in year one under Mark Byington. I'm giving the man an A. I have to give him an A. It's an absolute A. I don't give A pluses because I went to law school and there are no A pluses in law school. But for me, Mark Byington, he has done the best job so far as a first year coach in the SEC.
Yep, he's getting an A from me as well. I think if he would have snuck in that last win and be undefeated, I would give him an A plus. But, you know, there's some flaws there that need to be worked out. Everybody's got flaws. He can work on it during competition.
Fair enough. Everybody's got flaws. That's what Maddie's saying. All right. Let's talk about some more other expectations that we have going on for, this schedule, SEC play. Maddie, who do you think right now is a team that everybody needs to be paying attention to outside of the ones we've talked about, like Auburn, Tennessee? Like we really hold those two in high regards right now. Who is another team that you're like, we have got to pay attention to this team because I don't think they're going to fade. If anything, I think they're going to surpass expectations as we're playing throughout SEC play.
I mean, you talked about Tennessee earlier and how they're undefeated, and you don't have these undefeated teams come around. How about Florida? They're
Florida's
also
doing great. Yeah.
they're doing fantastic. The Gators have, faced some good teams so far, and I don't think they're going to go undefeated throughout the season, but they definitely need to be more in the talk with Tennessee and Auburn because they have a chance to go in and possibly steal the number one spot in the SEC if some of these other teams aren't careful.
They absolutely could. Our talk at the beginning of the year this year was, could Florida win the SEC championship this year? We didn't have them circled as our number one team to do so, but we were like, there's a vibe here. Like Florida's got some really good pieces. Elijah Martin, Walter Clayton, and then if we had Alex Condon, who has stepped up so far, he was my sophomore breakout of the year. Alex Condon has been good. Florida's look promising. I like the way that Florida looks right now, and they look like a really, really good basketball team. I'm with you. I'm with Florida. The longest active winning streak right now in the nation with 13 games. They're doing great. I love everything about this team. I think they could be really, really good. I'm looking out for Florida throughout the SEC. There's just a couple of things that I just don't have them like a front runner for the national championship, but I'm right. You're right. I think they could finish somewhere in the top five. For me, my team is Mississippi State. Quietly, very quietly, I don't think a lot of people realized exactly just how high State has risen in the computers throughout the course of this non-con, conference schedule right now. And the other thing I don't think people realize is also how good their offense has been. When you look at Mississippi State, right, you've got Josh Hubbard, who's a dude and can just get out there and score. He's playing a significant role right now at the one spot, but he's got a really good cast of players around him. Keyshawn Murphy's been really, really good. The five spot was our number one concern this season with them losing Tolu Smith. Keyshawn Murphy's been well. Michael Nwako has done well. Cam Matthews has played in there. And they've got this collective team right now of different guys who have played well in the front court. RJ Melendez has done well. Riley Kugel has done well, and mixing in there in the four spot every now and then. This collective has done really well. They've got a top 20 offense right now, and we know Chris Jans is a good defensive coach. So if they're playing this well, how high can they rise this season? I think that Mississippi State can finish somewhere top six, top five, and take a top 20 seed in the NCAA tournament coming out of this year. Right now, their projected record on KenPom is 22-9, and they're expected to go 10-8 in SEC play. They got a lot of 50-50 games, according to KenPom. I think they could steal a couple of them and come out and be a really front contender, a really strong team here through the course of this non-conference play or during conference play.
Yeah, I really like that pick, David. We've seen Christians. We've seen what he's able to do last season when Tolu Smith went out. Our expectations kind of sunk for this Mississippi State team, but he proved that they're still contenders even without maybe their star player, and they've filled that role well without him being there. And Christians has been able to outcoach quite a few top contenders for some NCAA spots so far
Yeah.
this season.
The only thing that concerns me is I just want to see a little bit more meat on their schedule, and they're definitely going to get that in conference play. So we're going to get a clear answer on who Mississippi State is as this conference schedule goes on. But they beat the crud out of Pitt. They beat the crud out of some other teams. They beat the crud out of Memphis in the Forum. It's just the Butler game. Like that's where you're asking questions about right now. So we'll find out exactly how good State is. But I got confidence in them that even if they don't end up in a really good spot, they may have a chance to make a Sweet 16 this year when they get to the NCAA tournament. So I like Mississippi State, top 20 team right now. Everybody needs to be paying a little bit more attention to Mississippi State this year. Maddie, give me a team that you think, or one or two, somebody you think might fade a little bit in the SEC play. Maybe not quite as strong a case as it has been.
We've talked about it a little bit so far today. I think Mark Pope's system is just hard to materialize in the SEC. You've got so many
It
good
did
defense.
well in the Big 12 for BYU.
I mean, it did, but you've got so many good defenses, especially this season in the SEC. And we saw what happened in that Ohio State game. We saw that Clemson game. If you have a poor shooting night, I think it's going to kind of knock them out of just where they're currently expected to be. I think they've got good wins. I don't think they have too many terrible losses. I think that Ohio State one can get a little rocky, but I think it has the potential for them to fade. And then also Oklahoma. We saw last season they did great on the non-conference schedule, and then conference play just kind of fell out of contention. Didn't even make the tournament. I see something similar for this team, and I think one of the big things is just because the SEC is going to be so hard this year.
I don't know if they have the talent. That's the thing with Oklahoma is like I think they're really good. I think if you put them in another conference, they might win the ACC this year or finish top three in the ACC this year. I don't know how they do in another conference. Like they remember this team was picked to be one of the bottom teams in the SEC this year. They've surpassed expectations. They've played well. But like Oklahoma, when it comes to part of what it's been, their defense is worse than last year's defense. When it where this team was at last year in KenPom. Their best win is, of course, against Arizona, but we really don't know how good that Arizona team actually is. That Arizona team's already taken 5 losses this year. And then you're also talking about that Michigan game that they won on a prayer. So it's been tougher. It's been very, very tough. Or they've got some good wins, but it's going to be a very tough path this season to get in there. They're only expected to win 8 conference games. Do people realize that? Like this is currently one of the best teams in the country, according to the AP poll. But like you start going down that line on Oklahoma, they're picked close to 40 right now in KenPom. They don't expect them to have a winning conference record coming out of the SEC. I think you're right. I think Oklahoma is going to be the team to watch fade the most. Another team that I think is I'm really concerned about and fading this throughout the course of the conference schedule, Texas. We've talked about Texas. That front court is a problem. They have a real front court problem. They have 2 dudes in that front court, and then anything beyond that is a serious, serious concern. I don't know if Cody and I don't know if the rest of the guys behind them really have the ability to sub the minutes that you're going to need to sub in to be effective. You're going to have to go guard heavy if you're Texas because like Jordan Pope, I have no doubt with is going to be really good. Julian Larry is going to be really good. Trey Johnson, Tremont Mark, those guys are going to get theirs, especially Trey Johnson. Trey Johnson's going to put up points no matter where you put him at. But the backcourt has been really good, but they have no depth in that front court. And let's face it, any team that they have faced so far who has been decent had has beaten them. North Carolina State, which is their best win so far in the season on the road, is 84th in KenPom. That's their best win, and they had to survive that one against North Carolina State. I'm kind of worried when they go through this one facing Texas A&M. We're going to get a real clear answer when they go into Reed because Texas A&M fans are ready for that game. They're going to have some other ones. They're expected to split a lot of series right now, but there are teams that are starting to play better that are on their schedule they're expected to split with. Maybe they end up losing a game or two that they're not expected to because I think Texas A&M is capable of beating them. I think Arkansas is capable of beating them because I think they have a better front court. Like there's a lot of teams that I'd like. I just don't see Texas doing that exceedingly well. They may be the biggest fall this season in the SEC, just based on the depth that they have in the front court or the front court issues.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the front court issues coming into the season and thinking that the backcourt was going to be able to kind of pull them up,
Supplement it a little bit more, yeah.
level it out. But I think that those issues in the front court are going to be glaring, especially when you're facing teams like Auburn, when you're facing teams like Tennessee, even guys like Jonas Adu at Arkansas. They're not going to be able to outlast the ones, especially the ones that run like a track beat style, and you have these
Big
two
man who can't run the floor with
big
them. Yeah.
get on the floor.
Yeah, if you worn out, if you're playing your guys for too long, yeah, those guys are not going to be able to run the entire pace the entire way. I'm with you here. Texas plays fast. They're not electric by any means. I'm joking by they play fast. They're the 230th fastest pace in college basketball as a team. They definitely play a lot slower than a lot of the teams in the SEC. I'm really concerned about them and their ability to play this season. But we'll see how it plays out. maybe they get some hot shooting nights. I don't think they're going to finish last, but I am concerned about how much they fade this year overall as a team. Maddie, this was the question that you sent in. We got about a couple more minutes here to talk about this one, but your thoughts on the NBA draft? I'm just going to go through because I looked at a mock draft earlier today. When you look at this mock draft here, in the first round, we got Trey Johnson out of Texas. No, he's a scorer. Number 12 coming into the draft, Jeremiah Fears. Number 13, Asa Newell. Number 17, Boogie Fland. Number 18, Colin Murray Bowles. Number 24, LeBaron Filan. Number 28, Adu Thero. And then when we look into the second round here, we have Walter Clayton at 41. Number 46, Janai Broom. Number 51, Mark Sears. Number 53, Zavonimir Izovich, or Big Z, out of Arkansas. Number 55, Chaz Lanier. And number 57, rounding out the end, Kobe Brea out of Kentucky. Maddie, just real quick, what kind of stands out to you about the draft? What are your thoughts on it right now, the SEC players that we need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is there's a lot of names in there that we obviously expect to see in there. One, are some of these younger players going to stick around and ride out some NIL and hope to improve that draft stock? And then two, some of the ones that we're expecting to be a little higher. Main one that comes to my mind is Mark Sears. You know, he could have gone last year, probably been a pretty good draft pick, and now he's set pretty far back. What does he need to do to increase his draft stock as well as some of the other players that may have either fallen or just aren't on the board yet? I'm interested to see what these guys decide to do when it comes to conference play to try and move ahead and move that stock up a little bit.
I'm surprised at some of the names that we're not seeing on here, right? Like, really, the first round, a lot of players are here. Like, Jeremiah Fears jumping up is a heck of an accomplishment. But we expect to see Trey Johnson. We expect to see Asa Newell. We expect to see Boogie Flynn. And Georgia fans who gave me crud about talking about not giving enough prop to Sumter Sorrell. Notice he's not in this mock draft right now. But Asa Newell, we told y'all, that's the best player y'all have recruited since Anthony Edwards. Like, that dude's awesome. But overall, it's also guys like Darren Reed isn't here. Where's Alex Condon? Where's some of the other players like Carter Knox that was projected to be as a first rounder? Where are those guys gone? They have high potential, but like they just are not appearing on this list right now. They're going to have to step it up in conference play if they want to be a draft pick this year. I think it's a conversation to be had and some guys to pay attention to.
Some big news coming out of Knoxville this week. Cameron Carr put his name in the transfer portal for the upcoming portal cycle. Carr was a guard for Tennessee who was part of the 2023 recruiting class. He averaged 4.8 points, 1.5 rebounds, and 10.3 minutes per game off the bench over the first 4 games of the season. He had 4 points and 1 rebound in 9 minutes against Austin Peay when he suffered a thumb injury. He had been sidelined since November 17th with a ligament injury in his left thumb that required surgery. Carr's departure leaves Tennessee with only 8 scholarship players currently available. The Vols started the season with 11 out of the possible 13 and have since lost Carr to his transfer decision and sophomore center JP Estrella with a season-ending foot surgery in November. Freshman guard Bishop Boswell didn't dress up for the NTSU game after injuring his right shoulder last week against Western Carolina.
Yeah, it's a huge loss. I'm not a fan of this. I don't like it when kids enter the transfer portal mid-season. I know he's not getting great minutes, but he's a very talented guard. He had a sister who played at Arkansas for the women's team there at one point. He's a talented player with a talented future. I just hate it when kids leave. I hate it when kids join the transfer portal early in the season. It's kind of like giving up on your teammates. It's not something I enjoy. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on Tennessee. None of the players had anything negative to say really at all. And I don't think Barnes had anything to say really negative in the least bit. Not a big contributor. I think a lot of teammates were like, okay, we get it.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It's kind of disappointing, especially as a fan, to see, someone just kind of give up, like I said, in the middle of the season.
Yeah, and we knew that he was going to have to work back, is kind of what Barnes was saying. He's going to have to get work back to get in his playing time because other guys were definitely taking it from him since the injury. It's rough, but you'd like to see a kid fight it out for at least the rest of the season before entering the transfer portal. Young kid, sophomore. He's obviously got several years of eligibility left to play basketball. and he'll land somewhere. He's a good talent. So let's see where his future lies at. Here is how your rest of your 2024 of basketball comes to a close. On Monday, Auburn takes on Monmouth. South Carolina plays Presbyterian. Missouri has Alabama State. Vanderbilt will play New Orleans. Calipari will have a minor anxiety attack as Arkansas faces Oakland. Mississippi State takes on Bethune-Cookman. Then on Tuesday, Kentucky faces Brown. And finally, Tennessee plays Norfolk State.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Gumble. Welcome to our New York studios in the NCAA Basketball Championship Selection Show.
We got some tragic news this week. Sportcaster Greg Gumble has died from cancer, according to a statement released by his family over the weekend. Gumble was a longtime CBS sportcaster who broke barriers during his career, calling some of the biggest sporting events. He was 78 years old. Those events included events like the Super Bowl and, of course, March Madness. The broadcaster had originally joined CBS Sports back in 1989, where he pulled double duty covering the NFL as a play-by-play announcer and an in-studio host for college basketball, including the NCAA tournament. You may remember his years of Gumble being the first voice and face you saw on CBS's Selection Sunday show. His family released a statement saying, which was shared by CBS on Friday, he leaves behind a legacy of love, inspiration, and dedication to over 50 extraordinary years in sports broadcast industry. And his iconic voice will never be forgotten. Maddie, I certainly feel like we have lost too many people in college basketball that have had massive impacts on the sport. Here locally, we lost Bob Holt, who was a writer for Arkansas. We also lost Bill Walton over the summer. We've also lost, Southern Florida's head coach this offseason before the season even began. So many names, so many people who have touched the sport in a different way. Louis Carnesecca, who was the coach there at St. John's back in the historic 80s for St. John's and their history there in the beginning of the Big East years. We've lost so many names here in 2024. And Greg Gumble, obviously a name that you may not have been 100% sometimes who it was, but you knew that face. You knew who it was when you turned on your TV if you were a basketball fan. You expected to see him every year. Of course, last year he wasn't on Selection Sunday due to this battle with cancer, but Greg Gumble is certainly a face that we'll remember a long time in the sport.
Definitely a large legacy that will be left behind, that we definitely will not soon forget.
Definitely not. Maddie, I remember, I think I've said it every March. My dad would get the paper out. He'd have this empty bracket, and he would just write furiously like a madman in shorthand and any other way that he can write down everything. Kids today will never understand filling out a paper bracket in the newspaper, and who's right there going through every one of those teams on Selection Sunday. It's Greg Gumble going down, and it's like number 1 seed, number 2 seed, now to the West region, next team over here. And it's my dad's just filling it out like a madman so they can get his bracket in on Monday morning at his office pool that he ran every year. But you just get the thing on the ESPN app now, so it's totally different. But Greg Gumble is always a face on that, mid-March afternoon. Sharon, that's always going to be a memory to me as a fan of the sport, even as a kid, even just a couple of years ago. So sad to lose him. All right, guys, if you have not already, please like and subscribe to the Hoopbound Southbound Show. We greatly appreciate it. We love having you guys here. You might have noticed we didn't do any game previews this week. Well, that's because it was the primer episode. We're talking about that here in midweek, so make sure that you join us for that. We're going to talk about these huge matchups that are coming up over the weekend, like Florida, Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee. Huge games. So please like and subscribe. We'll be back midweek. We've also got a bracketologist who's going to be talking to us on one-on-one this week and a separate video outside the show. So please grab that. So guys, please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Everybody have a happy new year, and we'll see you back in 2025.